I mean, the job I've got now, I'm pretty sure didn't really exist when I made the decision to become an accountant. Sort of data and analytics and a lot of that sort of very technology forward focus. It's not to say wasn't there 12, 13 years ago, but certainly wasn't as big of a thing as it is now. So certainly when I got into accountancy, it was off the back of having done a law degree, having been adamant throughout a lot of my childhood that I wanted to be a lawyer, and realised after a lot of work experience, actually it's not for me. I then went to Leeds to do a master's in classics and ancient history because that's an incredibly bankable degree. But it was something I really, really enjoyed and thought you're never really going to have the opportunity later in life to just take a year to just do this. And it was whilst I was doing that I thought, okay, well, I need a career that A, hopefully I'll enjoy, but B, that's quite sort of dependable. And I always really, really enjoyed maths at school. I was one of those cool kids that did extra maths because that's just how my brain worked. So I thought, oh, maths, accountancy, those go together. And ended up applying for audit, and was obviously successful, and have sort of worked my way up through the ranks to get to where I am now. So I think rather ironically, the role I currently do in data analytics uses quite a bit more maths than when I was sort of a frontline auditor.
I was always very good at maths at school, but actually practically now 5% of my day is probably maths. I do very, very little maths anymore. So in terms of the second part of the question, no, my role is far from what I expected it to be. So I did work experience where twice in year 10 and then again in year 12, both at an accountancy firm. The first one, I remember sitting down, it was a local shop from my town where I live. So I thought, oh, this would be interesting. So I just literally sat and ticked the cash book to say, yes, these numbers are correct. These agree to the bank statement. Very dull work, to be honest. I do very, very little of that anymore, thankfully. Technology has advanced. So I do very little statutory accounts, or what you would do on work experience, if you like.
I grew up surrounded by accountants, which now being on the other side of it and interviewing people tends to be people, even though accountants, it doesn't seem to be something you fall into without knowing someone or knowing a bit about it in the first place. So yeah, a family history of accounting, I guess. And to go right back, I'd applied for university. In hindsight, I'd applied for courses that weren't the right fit for me at all. And luckily, stumbled across an apprenticeship as I was getting my A-level results. That meant that I didn't have to go to university and could start working straight away, which was quite appealing at the time too. So yeah, time at that point in my career was quite important, and it meant that I could get chartered slightly more quickly than if I'd gone to university.
I never intended to become an accountant. So I studied geography and then global migration for my degree and my master's. And I actually decided I just love learning. And when I left, I wanted to have a job that I could go into and essentially gain another qualification. And that's when I came across the accountancy route, and was lucky enough that I was interviewed by Hayes McIntyre. And that's where I trained and was able to follow through. So if you'd even said to me probably like 2 days before applying for Hayes McIntyre I was going to be an accountant, I probably would have laughed. But it's worked out really well. I've really enjoyed it. It's a lot more people focused than I imagined. I think a lot of people assume being an accountant you've got to be good with numbers. And that's the other thing. I've only got a maths GCSE. I haven't got a maths A level either. And you do need a certain level of understanding, but I think the people skills and working with others is far more important than actually the number side and being able to add up.
The reason why I wanted to get into accounting initially, it was quite a safe option. I didn't know a huge amount about it at the time, but I wanted something that would challenge me and that would make me think. And accounting, I think, was one of those ways to go. In terms of whether or not the reality has matched my expectation, I'd say it's surpassed it. I used to think that accounting was all about numbers. What I've learned is it's not the case. It's only a very small part of that. To me, it's much more about logic than it is math, and it's a lot more people-focused, people-centric, and rather than just sitting behind a spreadsheet and not really interacting with people. So I'd say it's definitely surpassed any expectation I had about it.
what inspired me, I wanted a career that I could progress in. I knew I didn't want to go to university, so the option of getting paid while going to college and getting a qualification was definitely something that really interested me. I had a wide variety of exposure to different roles in accountancy, and payroll was the one that most interested me from a young age. So I started as a trainee and have worked my way up now to head of payroll services and director. And it's the best thing I've ever done. So it's definitely matched my expectation. Well, it absolutely exceeded it.
Accountancy wasn't ever something that I dreamt of going into, but I knew after university that I wanted to do something which would give me a further qualification, and something in finance that would sort of open a few doors. So by doing the ACA and getting chartered, I knew that that would sort of open up a variety of different roles for me. And I think a lot of people, when you're straight out of university, you've never had that sort of experience of actual working in a firm before, so it sort of gave me the time to get a feel for what accountancy would be, and also get another qualification. And then I sort of had that choice as to whether I wanted to stay in industry, in practice, or move into industry. I've obviously decided to stay in practice with my firm, but I think a lot of that is because of the sort of opportunities that have opened themselves up to me and the different things that I've taken on, as well as sort of just my role as an audit manager.
To be honest, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do after finishing uni. I had no intention when I was at uni that I would finish uni and go into accountancy. I couldn't really decide. There was loads of graduate programs on offer across a range of different industries, and in the end I just thought an accountancy qualification would be pretty safe, and if I had done the wrong thing, it would be very transferable to something else. So I thought, yeah, let's do accountancy. At the end of 3 years, I'll have a qualification. I should have quite a broad understanding of commerce, of businesses, to take somewhere else if I wanted to do something else.
What inspired me is exposure to business. So probably exposure to how my dad operated and my mum saw the world between them is definitely an aspect of it. So the way in which businesses operated always fascinated me, the way in which people interacted with the businesses, how they were privately owned or publicly owned. And it was something that I kind of grew up around, was that interaction and the advice and how businesses were being supported and individuals and people were being supported. And it was just a real buzz, in essence, of kind of how that all linked together. And I suppose kind of getting into accountancy was something I decided quite early on. So my father's an accountant and actually work with him now. And at the same time, it was a case of, I had a conversation with my mum and said, listen, I promise not to become an accountant. I promise not to work with my dad growing up. He's got a very particular way of working, very particular sort of setup. I made those promises. It wasn't a promise about sort of something else, i.e., I'm not going to join the army, or I'm not going to get a motorbike, or I'm not going to do something, or I'm not going to leave the country sort of thing, permanently at least. And that was kind of the promises she's made. But I had this real love for it. And kind of when joining, I started out at Deloitte, and that's a very particular way of working, a very particular client base, and a very particular sort of set of skills. And the opportunity came up a couple of years ago to, again, use those skills in a slightly different way. And that's where I am in my career today. So smaller firm, but top 100 accountancy firm with a few different departments alongside the accountancy, being business recovery. We've got payroll services, we've got corporate finance, and we've got our chartered financial planning business. So does how I grew up in my training correlate to my today? Probably more so from growing up, but how the industry has continued to progress, how the market is today, what people are doing, the changes of data, the change of process. Okay, the underlying is still the same. still producing a set of numbers at the end of the day and still supporting businesses in different ways, but the how it's being done and the opportunity to help on a really timely basis with more information, more science, that's really changed. But the relationships are still a relationship.